The town of Coldwater Flats, Alberta, held its annual domestic work placement every third Saturday of October. It was not called a placement for desperate women. It was called a settlement assistance fair, which was the kind of name that made a hard thing sound like a civic duty. Women who had come through the county office, from failed homesteads, from husbands who had not survived the winter, from situations that the county had quietly determined required intervention, were presented to the families and ranch operations of the district, who could take them on as housekeepers, cooks, or general help in exchange for board and a small weekly wage that the county had pre-negotiated on their behalf. Most of the women were placed before noon. The younger ones went first, the ones with round, pleasant faces and quick smiles, the ones who looked like they would not cause trouble or ask for much. Then the ones with references from previous households, taken by the larger ranch families who needed reliable hands and whose only question was whether the woman could manage a wood stove and keep her opinions to herself. It was 1903 and October, and the Alberta sky was doing what the Alberta sky does in October, which is remind you, without apology, that summer was a temporary arrangement. Nora Brandt stood at the back of the available women with her coat buttoned to the collar and no particular expression on her face. She was 31 years old, tall in the way that had always made people step back slightly when she walked into a room, with dark eyes that had the unsettling quality of noticing things you had not intended to show. She had been a schoolteacher in Three Hills for 6 years, before the school board had quietly redistributed her position to a younger woman whose father sat on the board. She had applied for 2 other teaching positions in the district. She had not been invited to interview for either. She had $43, a trunk of books, and a landlady in Coldwater Flats, who had been patient about the rent for as long as could reasonably be expected to last. She had come to the settlement assistance fair because she had run out of other options. She had not told anyone this. She narrated it to herself the way she had always narrated difficult facts, plainly, without decoration, because decoration did not change what was true. Miriam Calloway, she had been told to remember that name, the county woman running the fair, had looked at Nora's registration form with the careful neutrality of someone who has learned to manage expectations. Former schoolteacher, she had noted. That's quite specific. I'm also a competent cook, Nora said, and I can keep accounts. Yes, Miriam said, in a tone that suggested this was not the problem. The problem, though neither of them said it, was that Nora Brandt was 31 years old, unmarried, with a teaching background and a way of looking at people that made them feel assessed. This was not the thing most households in Coldwater Flats had come to find. She had watched from the back of the room as 11 women were placed in the first 2 hours. She had watched the families approach and turn away. Not rudely. The district had manners of a kind, but with the particular redirection of people who had arrived with a picture in their minds and were comparing everything they saw against it. She was still standing there when the afternoon light shifted and the room began to thin out. Isabelle Thorn had not intended to be at the settlement assistance fair at all. She had come to Coldwater Flats to file a land transfer at the county office, which shared a building with the hall where the fair was being held, and she had walked through the wrong door. She was 28 years old. She had been running her father's cattle operation outside the town of Drumheller for 3 years, since her father's stroke had made it necessary, and then when he died the following spring, permanent. The ranch was called Thorn Creek, which had been her mother's name before it was the land's name, and which she had not changed because it suited both. She managed it with a crew of 4 hands, a foreman named Alistair, who was 62 and had worked the property since before Isabelle was born, and the particular determination of someone who knows that the people who expect her to fail are watching closely and keeping score. She was not, she would have told you, lonely. She was busy. These were different things. She had walked through the wrong door and found herself in a room where a county woman with a clipboard was explaining to the remaining families that the fair was winding down. There were 2 women left unclaimed. One was very young and visibly frightened. The other was standing at the back of the room with her coat buttoned to the collar, looking at the county woman with the focused attention of someone who is listening carefully and deciding what to make of what she hears. Isabelle was about to turn around and find the right door when the county woman looked at her with the mild desperation of someone trying to close out an afternoon that has not gone entirely as planned. "Are you looking for household help?" the county woman said. "We have 2 remaining placements." Isabelle looked at the 2 women. She looked at the young frightened one, who was placed almost immediately by an older couple who had come back for a second look. Then there was one. She looked at the woman in the coat. The woman in the coat looked back at her. She did not look frightened. She did not look hopeful. She looked like she was deciding something. "What's your background?" Isabelle said. "Schoolteacher," the woman said. 6 years. I can also cook, keep accounts, and I know enough about cattle to not walk behind them." Isabelle looked at Miriam Calloway. "What's the placement rate?" $12 a month, Miriam said. "Board included." "What's your name?" Isabelle said to the woman. "Nora Brandt." Isabelle looked at Nora Brandt. Nora Brandt looked at Isabelle Thorn. The county woman looked at her clipboard. $12, Isabelle said. She was not sure, in the moment of agreeing to it, exactly what she was doing. She had no need of a housekeeper. Alistair's wife, Bev, had been managing the house cooking on a casual arrangement for 2 years. She had come to Coldwater Flats to file a land transfer. She had walked through the wrong door. "When can you start?" she said. Nora Brandt picked up the bag at her feet. It was a sensible bag, not small but not large, and beside it was a trunk that was clearly full of books, which Isabelle noted and did not remark on. "Now," Nora said, "if that's convenient. I have a wagon outside," Isabelle said. They walked out of the settlement assistance fair together. Isabelle was not sure what she had just agreed to. She knew she had agreed to it deliberately, which was different from understanding why. The drive to Thorn Creek was 4 hours. The Alberta prairie in October is not a subtle landscape. It goes on in all directions with the flat confidence of something that does not feel the need to impress you, and the sky above it is the particular shade of pale that happens when the light is leaving without hurry. They talked the way people talk when they are sharing a long drive and have not yet established what they are to each other. Nora asked about the ranch. Isabelle described it in the practical terms she always used. Acreage, herd count, the pasture rotation she had changed 2 years ago when the east section started showing signs of overgraze. She did not describe it the way some people describe their land. With the particular tenderness that made Isabelle feel she was being asked to perform something she did not have the vocabulary for. Nora listened. When Isabelle finished, Nora said, "The east section rotation, did that require negotiating with any adjacent landholders?" Isabelle looked at her. "Yes. The property to the north has a shared fence line. We had a dispute about it for about a year. How did you resolve it?" "I bought 2 of their fence posts and suggested we were all better off with clear boundaries and fewer conversations about it." Nora almost smiled. Something moved at the corner of her mouth that was not quite there yet. "What about you?" Isabelle said, Nora told her. "The school in 3 Hills. 6 years of it, every grade mixed together in the one-room building, which she had found satisfying in the way that complicated things are satisfying when you are the right person for them. The board decision." She said it without grievance, in the manner of someone narrating a fact that is simply part of the record. The 2 failed applications. The $43. "They gave your position to someone younger?" Isabelle said. "Someone whose father is on the board," Nora said. "She's 22. She'll be a reasonable teacher in about 4 years with experience. That's a very fair assessment of someone who took your job." "It's accurate," Nora said. "Fair is a different question." Isabelle looked at the road ahead. "Did it make you angry?" Nora was quiet for a moment. "It made me tired," she said. "Angry requires believing the outcome might have been different. I'm not sure I believed that." Isabelle did not say anything to that. She had had a version of the same feeling. She recognized it precisely. After a while, she said, "I should tell you something about the arrangement." "All right," Nora said. "I didn't come to Coldwater Flats looking for household help," Isabelle said. "I came to file a land transfer. I walked through the wrong door." There was a pause. "I see," Nora said. "I'm telling you because I don't think it's useful for you not to know." "No," Nora said. "It isn't." She looked at the prairie for a moment. "Are you going to take me back?" "No," Isabelle said. "I have 12 acres of kitchen garden that haven't been organized in 2 years and an account ledger that Alistair keeps by memory, which works until it doesn't. And I think you're the kind of person who would be annoyed by a disorganized ledger." "Extremely annoyed," Nora said. This time she actually smiled. It was a quick, unguarded thing, there and then composed again, but Isabelle saw it and noted it the way she noted useful information. Thorn Creek was not a pretty ranch in the way that photographs made ranches look. It was a working ranch, which meant it looked like work. The main house solid and practical. The barn large and well-maintained because the barn was the point. The yard churned to mud in October, and the fence lines straight in the way of something that had been repaired often enough to get it right. Alistair met them at the gate. He was 62, broad across the shoulders with a white beard and the patient expression of a man who has seen most things and learned to wait before deciding how to feel about the rest. He looked at Nora Brandt the way he looked at everything new on the property, carefully, without commitment. "Alistair," Isabelle said, "this is Nora Brandt. She'll be taking over the house accounts and the kitchen garden in the spring." "And cooking," Alistair said. "Bev can continue the cooking if she's willing," Isabelle said. "Miss Brandt is also capable if it becomes necessary." "Can manage both," Nora said to Alistair, because she had understood immediately that Alistair was the person whose opinion in this yard had weight and history behind it. Alistair looked at her for another moment. Then he nodded once, the nod of a man who is withholding full judgment, but is not opposed to the direction of travel. "Rooms made up in the house," he said. "Bev put extra wood in." The house was warm and smelled of wood smoke, and the particular combination of old plaster and pine that Isabelle had grown up with and no longer noticed. Nora noticed it. She stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment with her bag and looked at the room with the assessing attention she gave everything. "The stove draws well," she said. "Yes," Isabelle said. "The ledger, shelf in the office. Third door on the right." Nora nodded. "I'll look at it in the morning." She went to the room Alistair had indicated and closed the door. Isabelle stood in the kitchen and looked at the stove and thought about the wrong door she had walked through in Coldwater Flats, and about $43, and about the way Nora Brandt had looked at her across a room full of people who had already decided to look away. There was trouble almost immediately, though not the kind Isabelle had expected. The ledger was, as Nora described it the following morning over coffee, not dishonest, just personal. Alistair's system was coherent to Alistair, which is a system as long as Alistair is there, but not a system in the way that could survive a bad winter or an absentee foreman. "I'm not criticizing him," Nora said before Isabelle could speak. "I'm describing a structural problem." "He'll take it as criticism," Isabelle said. "Then I'll talk to him before I change anything." She did. Isabelle did not hear the conversation, only observed its aftermath, which was Alistair at lunch, looking thoughtful rather than closed, which she recognized as progress. The real trouble came from town. There was a man in Coldwater Flats, the son of the family that owned the grain elevator, who had decided at some point that Thorn Creek was a ranch that ought to be under different management. He had made 2 offers for the property in the last 18 months. Isabelle had declined both. He had, in the way of men who cannot imagine that no means no from a source they do not respect, taken her refusals as negotiating positions rather than answers. His name was Preston Webb, and he came to the ranch in November on the pretext of a fence line discussion, and he sat at Isabelle's kitchen table with his hat on and talked to her about the difficulties of a woman managing a cattle operation alone, which was not actually a discussion about the fence line. Nora was at the kitchen table when he arrived. She was reorganizing the accounts into a proper ledger she had ridden to town to purchase herself with her own money, which she had told Isabelle she would deduct from the first month's wage. She did not leave when Preston Webb came in. She looked at him the way she looked at everything, carefully assessing, without performance. Preston Webb looked at her and looked at Isabelle and said, with the smile of a man who considers himself charming, "I didn't know you had company, Miss Thorn." "Miss Brandt manages the house accounts," Isabelle said. "She stays." His fence line discussion took approximately 12 minutes and said nothing about fence lines. When he left, the kitchen was quiet for a moment. "Does he come often?" Nora said, without looking up from the ledger. "Often enough," Isabelle said. "What does he want?" "The ranch." Nora looked up. "Will he get it?" "No," Isabelle said. Nora looked at her for a moment with those assessing eyes. Then she looked back at the ledger. "Good," she said simply. Isabelle went to find Alistair. She did not go to find him to discuss Preston Webb. She went because she needed something to do with the particular feeling that sitting at her own kitchen table had given her, which was the uncomfortable warmth of not being alone with a problem for the first time in a very long time. November became December. December in southern Alberta is a full commitment. The cold does not suggest itself. It arrives with the authority of something that has been doing this long before you got here and will continue long after. Nora organized the ledger. She organized the kitchen garden plan for spring, which she drew on paper in the evenings at the table, referencing a book on prairie soil she had, apparently, brought with her. She began, with Bev's cheerful collaboration, to understand the kitchen well enough that by December she could manage the bread without supervision, which Bev treated as a personal success. She had also, without announcing it, begun tutoring the two hands who could not read. They came to the kitchen 3 evenings a week and sat at the table with the focused uncertainty of men who want to learn something, but are not sure what it will mean about them to need it taught. Nora taught them without ceremony. She treated their questions as reasonable because they were reasonable. By the end of December, the younger one, a 20-year-old named Gil, had read his first complete sentence aloud and looked at the table afterward with an expression that required Nora to find something to do with her hands. Isabelle found out about the tutoring from Alistair, who told her in the tone of a man reporting something he approves of, but did not expect. "Did you know?" "No," Isabelle said. "She didn't ask," he said. "No," Isabelle said. They both looked at the kitchen window for a moment. "She's useful," Alistair said, which was, from Alistair, a substantial statement. Isabelle had begun, without planning to, noticing where Nora was at the end of the day, not with anxiety, just the particular awareness of someone whose household had acquired a new fixed point, the specific posture at the table, upright without being rigid, the way she poured coffee like someone who had decided that small things done well were worth doing well. The evenings had acquired a different texture. Less silence. Not more noise exactly, just less of the specific silence that is the absence of someone to talk to. She had not said this to anyone. She was not sure it needed saying. The conversation happened in February, because February on the Alberta prairie gives you very little else to do but confront things. They were sitting at the kitchen table after the hands had gone to the bunkhouse and Alistair had gone home. The wind side was doing what February wind does, which is make every wall seem slightly thinner than it actually is. Nora was reading. Isabelle was looking at the accounts, which no longer required her attention because they were now organized, but which gave her something to do with her eyes. "Nora," she said. Nora looked up. "I need to say something," Isabelle said. "All right," Nora said. She closed the book. When something required attention, she gave it full attention. This was one of her consistent qualities, and it made saying things to her feel like a serious undertaking. "When I agreed to take you on in Coldwater Flats," Isabelle said, "I told you. I walked through the wrong door." "I remember," Nora said. "I've been thinking about whether that was the right way to describe it," Isabelle said. "I don't think it was." Nora was quiet, listening. I think I walked through the right door, Isabelle said. I think I just didn't understand what I was walking toward. She looked at the accounts. This ranch has been managed by one person for 3 years. That person is me. I am competent at it. I believe that. But I have been doing it in a way that is, I think, not sustainable over the length of time I intend to run this operation. In what way? Nora said carefully. In the way, Isabelle said, of someone who has decided that needing no one is a form of strength, which I have observed from the outside is not actually strength, but a habit that develops when needing people has not worked out. There was a pause. That's a very accurate self-assessment, Nora said. I've had time to develop it, Isabelle said. She looked at her. What I am trying to say, and saying badly, is that I have been considering what a more permanent arrangement would look like for the ranch. For you, if you had any interest in that. Permanent how? Nora said. Isabelle looked at the stove. The school board in Drumheller has been without a teacher since September, she said. I was told about it by the minister's wife, who mentioned it in passing and did not know she was telling me something relevant. She looked back at Nora. The board there is different from the one in Three Hills. The chairman is a woman. I've met her. Nora was very still. I am not suggesting you leave, Isabelle said quickly. What I'm suggesting is that this does not have to be one thing or the other. The ranch accounts are in order. The kitchen garden is planned. The spring work will be substantial, but it is not daily work in the same way. She paused. I think you are a person who needs to teach. I think you have been not teaching for 8 months, and it has cost you something, and I think you probably have not said so because you do not complain. I don't complain, Nora said. No, Isabelle said, which is either a temperamental thing or a learned one. Both, Nora said after a moment. Yes, Isabelle said. I thought so. The kitchen was quiet. The wind pushed at the walls. What you're proposing, Nora said slowly, is that I stay, with the ranch as a permanent base, and teach in Drumheller, if that's possible, Isabelle said. If you'd want that, why? Nora said, not challengingly. She wanted the honest answer, and her expression said so clearly. Isabelle looked at the table. Then she looked up. Because this ranch is better managed since October than it has been in 3 years, she said, and because Alistair, who has worked here for 30 years and trusts no one quickly, trusts you, and because Gil read a full sentence in December, and it was the best thing that happened on this property all year. She paused. And because I have been doing this alone for a long time, and I am not, I have concluded, better at it for being alone. And because you saved Bev's bread recipe from that falling-apart notebook and wrote it out properly and did not make anything of it. She stopped. And because I walked through the right door by accident, and I would prefer not to lose the thing I found by accident because I failed to say so directly. Nora looked at her for a long moment. The assessing look, the one that was there from the first moment in Coldwater Flats, taking stock, noting facts, arriving at conclusions. I'd want that, she said. Isabelle did not say anything. She looked at the stove and felt something in her chest settle, the way a load shifts when it's properly balanced for the first time. The Drumheller School Board, chaired by a woman named Edna Forsyth, who had been fighting for a qualified teacher since September and was not in the habit of letting qualified people walk away, interviewed Nora in March and offered her the position before she had left the building. Nora accepted. She rode to Thorn Creek in the spring dusk and told Isabelle at the corral, where Isabelle was finishing the evening check on the new calves. She offered it before I left, Nora said. I know her, Isabelle said. She doesn't waste time. Neither do I, Nora said. Isabelle looked at her. No, she agreed. Neither do you. Spring came to Thorn Creek the way it comes to the Alberta prairie. Apologetically at first, then all at once, like something that has been waiting for permission. The kitchen garden went in along the plan Nora had drawn through the winter months. The east pasture rotation that Isabelle had fought for 2 years held through the calving season with no complications. Alistair added a second line to the ledger system and told Nora it was logical, which was the highest form of praise in his vocabulary. Nora taught school in Drumheller 4 days a week and managed the ranch accounts and the garden on the 5th and on weekends. It was a schedule that should have been too much, and that she managed with the focused efficiency of someone doing, at last, exactly the right amount of the right things. She grew another kind of tall that year, not in height, which was already established, but in the way she stood. The particular straightness of someone who has stopped bracing for the next removal and starts simply occupying the space they are in. The trouble from Preston Webb came to nothing. He made a third offer for the ranch in April. Isabelle declined it in a letter that was 3 sentences long, and she showed it to Nora before she sent it. "Is that enough?" Nora said. "It's accurate," Isabelle said. "It is," Nora agreed. "Send it." She sent it. Webb did not come back to the property again. Whether this was because of the letter, or because he had, in the intervening months, developed a clearer sense of what he was dealing with, neither Isabelle nor Nora could say, and neither of them particularly cared. At 17, Gil, the younger hand, could read at a level that impressed the minister's wife when he read the notice board at church and corrected a misspelling without thinking. He looked embarrassed when Nora mentioned it later. She told him he should not be embarrassed. She said it without making it into a lesson. He understood it anyway. Alistair retired 3 years later at 65, with a small ceremony that he found mortifying, and that Nora organized anyway because some things require acknowledgement, whether or not the person in question agrees. He stayed in the district. He came to dinner on Sundays for years afterward. In the spring of the 4th year, Nora Brandt was sitting at the kitchen table, correcting examination papers from Drumheller, when Isabelle came in from the evening check, and stood in the doorway for a moment, as she sometimes did, noting the table, the lamp, the particular composition of things that had become the fixed point of the end of every day. "I need to ask you something," Nora said, without looking up. "Ask," Isabelle said. Nora set down her pen. She looked up. "Are you glad," she said, "that you walked through the wrong door?" Isabelle looked at her. 31 years old when they met, 35 now, with the same dark eyes that had been assessing the facts of situations since Isabelle first saw her across a thinning room in Coldwater Flats, and which had not, in 4 years, stopped being the most useful thing in any room they were in together. "Every day," Isabelle said, "every single day." Nora looked at her for a moment, then went back to her examination papers. Isabelle hung her coat and washed her hands and sat down at the table across from her and looked at the lamp and thought about $12 a month and what it had purchased. Not a housekeeper, not an account manager, not even a schoolteacher exactly. A person who had been placed at the end of a room that was emptying out and who had met every assessment with her own, and who had looked at a ranch in October with frank, intelligent eyes and decided that this was, on the available evidence, a reasonable place to be. The best $12 Thorn Creek had ever spent, though that was the wrong way to put it, and they both knew it. Some things that look like transactions, from the outside, are not transactions at all. They are the moment a door opens. The wrong door, the right door, whatever you want to call it, and something you had stopped expecting to find is simply there, in a coat buttoned to the collar, deciding whether you are worth the risk. She was. So was the woman who walked through the door.